Giving you a little context. But also, if you want to see that song get really interesting, show up at a youth group Wednesday night. You'll get a real good taste of that song. But anyways, hey, well, guys, well, good morning. Good to be with you. Good to have you here. Well, I try to figure out my technology here. So guys, so this morning we've been walking through this series called Stories of a Better World, where we're talking about the parables of Jesus. And it's I don't know about you, it's been really fun getting to kind of walk through and hear like the different voices and hear different people kind of like share these really core truths that Jesus is sharing through these parables. And so this morning, we're going to be looking at the parables of the tower builder and the warrior king in Luke 14. And it really kind of gets at this idea of what we call counting the cost. And for me, what kind of resonated with me is this idea of counting the cost. So I think I mentioned before, me and Diana, we've kind of started getting into hiking a little bit more. I don't know, how many people would you say are like enjoy going hiking, maybe avid hikers? Yeah, I am, that for us, like that's I wouldn't say we're avid hikers, but we are starting to enjoy it, and I feel like it's a way for me to get some exercise and, kind of for me to just kind of spend some time with Diana. And, it's funny, some things like you learn while you're hiking, like I've learned that when people say, when I'm hiking and someone looks at me and says, hey, you're almost there, what they're saying is like, dude, you're not looking good. Like you're almost there. And so like, I've had a couple times where I've just started like, you're almost there. I'm like, already? I'm already looking that bad? Like, oh no, that can't be good. But there's other things I've learned of like, that your level of preparedness or just being aware of where you're going hiking makes a massive difference. If you go and you look and you say, okay, there's this really big hike coming up. It's probably going to be thousands of feet we're going to have to climb, so we probably need to bring lots of water, maybe bring some snacks, have the right shoes, all these things like that has a massive impact. And also being aware of, if this is going to be a really hard hike, I need to kind of go in knowing that and know that, hey, when it gets hard, that's okay. It's going to be worth it, because when you get to the end, there's going to be this really cool waterfall, maybe a lake, a really cool mountain view. Being aware of those things, right? Like that plays a huge role. And I don't know if you know this, there was actually a law passed in Skamania County where because of they've had lots of instances where maybe people didn't think about that, they've had people that there's this 1,000-foot climb I'm going to do, and they would show up with like Mountain Dew and like sneakers and just go for it, and then they would get hurt, and rescue and like search and rescue would have to come and like bring them down. So they started saying that if there's actually a fine they're going to levy out, that if they feel like you weren't prepared or you didn't do the proper measurements to go on that hike, that you could actually get fined up to $1,000 if you have to call search and rescue. And you showed up and like, hey, dude, you're in slippers, so you're trying to hike this mountain. Maybe that wasn't the best call, right? And their idea isn't to discourage you from going hiking, but to be thoughtful and say, okay, to count the cost, right? Okay, I'm going to do this hike. Am I prepared? And also, am I aware of the difficulty of this hike? Am I aware of what this hike entails? And so it sounds harsh, but the idea isn't to discourage, but actually to encourage, to be thoughtful in what you are embarking on. And so this morning, as we look at these two parables, Jesus is kind of getting at this idea of counting the cost and the importance of it, and the importance of it when it comes to following him. That just like this hiking line, just like going hiking, that the goal of these parables isn't to discourage people from following him, right? That's not what he's doing. And in fact, the parable just before this is Jesus reminding people that the kingdom is open to everybody, that everybody is invited. And so he's not trying to discourage people, but if anything, he's trying to say that he loves them enough to tell them the truth about what they are embarking on when they choose to follow him, right? And so as we hear these words, they might feel uncomfortable. And I think part of the reason why, as we hear these words from Jesus, as we hear these difficult, kind of even a challenge of counting the cost, why it might be uncomfortable for us, is because I think each of us deep down, we have this picture of what the good life looks for us. Maybe it's success, comfort, a fulfilling relationship, financial stability, freedom from stress. And these things they're not bad things. But what Jesus is trying to make clear is that he invites us on this journey, and he tells us to count the cost. But he's also reminding us that we have this in us, that we try to seek the good life on our own. And he says it's only in him that these things can't be the foundation of our lives. All right, Timothy Keller, Got to turn that on. That might be helpful. He says, if we look to some creative thing to give us the meaning, hope, and happiness that only God himself can give, it will eventually fail to deliver and break our hearts. And so while these words from Jesus may actually can be difficult, what he's calling us to is surrender to him, because he knows in him that's where we find true life. That's where we really find the life that he desires for us to experience. And so it's not because, and he's not promising us an easier life, but he's offering us real life. Life with him, shaped by his love and marked by his peace, and grounded in something that the world can't take away. And so it's like what he tells us in Mark 10. He says that whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. And so that's what he's inviting us into. He's inviting us to experience real life in him. And so doing that, though, he wants us to still count the cost, consider what this journey is going to require. And so to set the context, we're going to jump in these two parables, but before we do that, I want to set a little bit of the context of where these words lie. So just before Jesus shares these two parables, he actually is at a dinner party with a group of Pharisees. And as he's hanging out with them, he tells this parable of this great banquet where this guy invites people over, but the people he originally invited decided they don't want it. They're too busy. Either they're taking care of their animals, or maybe they have other commitments. One of them got married. Says, "Oh, sorry, I can't be there." And so this guy ends up inviting, like, okay, well, if you can't be there, I'm going to invite everyone. I'm going to invite a bunch of other people to come. And typically it was people that were not really invited to parties, not really invited to banquets. And so the message was clear. He's saying being part of the kingdom of God isn't about religious status, but humble surrender. So he says everybody is invited, even the people that the religious elite thought weren't welcome in the kingdom. He says the outsiders are welcome. They're part of this. They're invited to be part of this kingdom. But then Jesus in verse 25, which is where we're going to be picking up in Luke 14, he shifts. He goes from speaking at this dinner party to a group of the religious elite. Now he's speaking to a crowd of people that are following him. And it's almost like he's saying that yes, everybody is invited, but there is a cost that comes with accepting my invitation. There is, I want everybody to accept the invitation, but I also want you to understand what that invitation entails. He doesn't want us coming in blind to that. And so he's speaking to these people that are likely really excited. They hear all the things that Jesus is doing. And in that crowd, like typically in Scripture, when he talks about a crowd, it's usually not just a bunch of people that are committed followers. There's kind of a mixed bag of people where they're at spiritually. And so what Jesus says is he invites them and says, okay, I want to really clarify, if you really want to follow me, I want to make sure you understand what you're doing. I want to really make sure you understand what you are agreeing to follow, what you are embarking on. And so that's what we're going to pick up in chapter 14, verse 25. So if you got your Bibles with you and want to turn there. Otherwise, I'll read it out loud for us. But these are the words. So as Jesus turns to this crowd of people that have been following him, these are the words that he shares. It says, large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build a tower and wasn't able to finish. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he's able with 10,000 men to oppose the one who coming against him with 20,000? If he's not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is neither fit for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. So as he's talking with the crowd, Jesus touches on three important aspects of discipleship. The terms of discipleship, the cost of discipleship, and the commitment of discipleship. So we're going to unpack these three together, but we want to start first with the terms of discipleship. See, when Jesus turns to the crowd, he's setting the bar of really what it means to follow him, and he wants them to clearly understand what those terms are up front. It's kind of like when you agree to something, right? When you're signing when you're like either signing up for a subscription to something, like sometimes you get like the fine print that's there. Well, Jesus is doing the opposite, right? He's not trying to hide things from us and say, oh, like, hey, you should follow me, but then I'm going to put in fine print all these like really difficult things that come with it. He wants us to be understand very clearly, like, hey, this is what it means to really follow me. I want you to understand, plain and simple, this is what it means. And so he tells them that to be a true disciple, or another word we can use is apprentice, because sometimes the word disciple is not as common now. But what we're talking about is someone who's a lifelong learner of Jesus. It says being a disciple or apprentice of Jesus requires total allegiance. He uses that word in there, hate. And I don't know about you guys, when you read that, sometimes does it make you uncomfortable at first when you read it? It's like, oh, I should hate? Right, wait, hate my father and mother, hate brother and sister, hate children? Like, what's going on there? Well, we have to understand that he's not actually calling for like emotional hostility towards our family. That's not what he's getting at, right? And during that time, that the word hate was kind of meant to be more like a Semitic idiom, and it really just meant to love something more, to have priority over something. And so what Jesus is trying to get at is that, man, that when it comes to him, he should have total allegiance, and we should give priority or even love him more than family, more than friends, more than the people closest to us. And it's kind of, and so that would have been, and so he's telling us, like, that's where I want you to be. Like, your allegiance should be that you should love me above all else. And the paradox is that actually when we do that, it doesn't make us less loving with the people around us, but makes us more loving. That we become more patient and gracious and kind with those. But his call says, hey, that part of the terms is that you should love me above all other relationships. I should be the priority. And that would have been a big deal at that time. I think it can be tough even for us now, but at that time it was huge, because in that culture, family was everything. Your family relationships were everything. Everything flowed from the family. It was because your family wasn't just relationships. It was your whole world, your name, your job, your land, your future. Everything came from your family. And so to put Jesus first literally could mean losing your safety net. It could mean losing your livelihood. It could even mean losing your place in the community. So it was a big thing that he was calling them to do and calling us to do. But then he doesn't only just call us to put Jesus ahead of our relationships, but even ahead of ourselves. He says that anyone who wants to be his disciple has to carry their cross and follow him. And we know that like that term, like carry your cross, that if you were someone that was convicted of, that you were sentenced to die by dying on the cross and executed that way, that you would actually have to carry the cross beam of that cross to your execution site. And so this idea of carrying your cross would have had this connotation of death. And what he's referring to is, he says, to carry your cross, to be my disciple, you have to carry your cross, meaning it kind of gave this image of death, but not just physical death, but saying like that it is a call to die to our pursuit of self-fulfillment and control. That we are called to die to ourselves, to say, hey, God, Jesus, that you have full authority on all my ambitions, desires, control of my life. Jesus, I give you full control of those things. Like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who literally had to pay the cost of following Jesus with his life, said, when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. So the idea of following the terms, he says, I want you to put me above all other relationships, and I want you to entrust me with every part of your life. Are you willing to do that? Because that's what it really means to follow me, to surrender every part of your life to me. And he puts that up front because he doesn't want us to be like surprised by that. He wants us to know this is what it really means to embark on a journey with me. Is to surrender everything to me, entrust everything to me, hold nothing back. And so he lays out the terms of discipleship, but then he talks about the cost, starting in verse 28. Right, having laid down the terms, he tells them to count the cost, and that's where he uses these parables. He says, I want you to count the cost of knowing what it means to follow me. Are you willing to embark on this, knowing what it's going to cost you? And so he gives these two parables, one of a guy who's building a tower, and where he says naturally, when naturally you would want to calculate the cost of building something before you would try to build it. And he says, and if he starts building without considering the cost, he may not be able to finish it, and it would be super embarrassing for this guy. But the other parable is about this warrior king. He says, would you really go into battle with 10,000 without knowing if you could actually defeat someone with 20,000 people? Like, would you do that? And all of these are painting this picture of what Jesus wants them to understand is that to seriously consider what it will cost to follow him before they commit. He wants them to be fully aware of what it entails. And to do that, he tells them, count the cost. Consider what it's going to take for you to follow me before you endeavor into it. I think about, and really, we do this in a lot of areas of our life, don't we? We count the cost of things. If you're going to take a vacation, you're going to count the cost, at least hopefully, right before you go on the vacation and realize, like, okay, do I have enough money to go take this vacation? If you're going to do any projects at home, maybe you're going to want to say, okay, can I afford to do this week? Can I afford to do this now? Or even like with our time, we ask, okay, count the cost. Can I afford to give time to do this? Can I afford to do this right now? Me and Dinah, we're in the middle of like trying to reorganize our house, and so there's I can't say me and Dinah, really it's Diana is building a lot of like the structures in our garage. If you ever have any handy projects, don't ask me. It's going to end really badly if you ask me to fix them for you. But Dinah is really great at putting things together, and so we had this big project, like, man, we look at our garage and there's just stuff everywhere. And we're like, okay, we want to really figure out how to like make sure we get it organized, place to put boxes and things, and so she really came up with this awesome like tote rack where we can store our boxes and like Ellie's childhood belongings. And so but before we did that, we had to say, okay, do we have enough money? Because it was a little bit of a financial undertaking to build it. We're like, okay, do we have the money? Because we didn't want to start it and then realize, oh, we don't have enough. Now we have like this half-built rack in our garage that can't really hold anything. And so Jesus is saying, it's kind of saying, hey, that same idea, like, well, you realize or not, you count the cost for a lot of things in life. And the same is true when it comes to following me. You need to understand, okay, this is going to be, if I know what the terms are, am I willing to follow you, knowing what that cost is going to be? Now, he wants us to know that following him will require us to surrender our time, our money, career, talents, relationships, and even our lives to him, to entrust him with all those things. Let him have the main say in those areas of our life. He's saying, are you willing to entrust me with every part of your life? And are you willing to do that and follow me knowing that that's what the cost is? That we don't get to be in control, but that we let him be in control of those things. That we let him knowing that, hey, he's loving and caring, and we can trust him with that. So he lays out what the cost is for us, and then finally he talks about the commitment. That yes, he lays out the terms, he lets us know what the cost is, but then he kind of talks about what the commitment of discipleship, and he does it with this metaphor of salt. See, because pure salt, it's a stable compound that it retains its flavor and its usefulness. But in like Palestine in that time, it was like the common salt was often mixed with other minerals, and so if that mixture got damp or stale, the salt could leach out and it could become tasteless, and it really would become useless. And so the point he's trying to drive home is that salt has a purpose, right? Flavor, preservative. But if it loses those qualities, it kind of stops being salt. And so the same way, living as a disciple means living fully surrendered to Jesus. It means giving him, Jesus, I invite you and trust you in every part of my life and give you priority in those things in my life. Let you speak into those and shape those how you see fit. And when we drift in our commitment or we lose our desire to follow him, we miss the heart of what it truly means to be a disciple. That when we kind of drift away from the commitment and the desire to follow him, we forget and our willingness to surrender to him. We lose the heart of what it means to be a disciple. But the good news is Jesus doesn't give up on us when we lose our saltiness. Right? He doesn't throw the towel on us. He restores, he renews us, and he recommissions us just like he did with Peter. Right? Because we saw Peter falter, right? When he was confronted with Jesus, when he was confronted with someone like, hey, Peter, you know Jesus. As Jesus was being questioned, Peter's like, I'm out of here. No way. And Jesus still restored him. Right? So it's not about being perfect, but making the decision to follow him even when it isn't easy. And so he's like, there's a cost, but also the commitment is, are you willing to follow me knowing it's not going to be easy? Are you willing to follow me knowing it won't always be comfortable? It won't always feel good, but are you willing to trust that I'm worth it? Are you willing to trust that what I'm inviting you into is better than any version of the good life that you've ever imagined? Are you willing to trust me that I'm worth it? And so this call to surrender every part of our lives, it's also a good reminder that this isn't like a one-time decision, right? Like just because even if we've been following Jesus for years, we have to make this daily decision to say, Jesus, I'm going to follow you today. I'm going to commit to you today to surrender every part of my life to you. Right? It's not just something we do when we first decide to follow Jesus and then say, cool, I did it. I'm great. I got this. As Eugene Peterson puts it, it's a long obedience in the same direction. That's what he's inviting us into. He says that discipleship means commitment, not giving up when it's tough, but not giving up because we know Jesus is worth it. That being part of his kingdom is worth it. And so through all this, I think here's what we need to understand. That following Jesus isn't just about trying harder. And I think if we read these parables and we go home and we say, I got to try hard, I got to do this, I got to roll up my sleeves, and I think there's some merit to that. Following Jesus does require effort. But what he's saying is that ultimately what the heart of it is, the heart of discipleship is surrender. Is willing to say, Jesus, I'm letting you have say on every part of my life. And for us to seriously reflect on, hey, Jesus, are there parts of my life that if I'm honest, I'm not really surrendering that to you. I've kind of withheld control of that. And so that's what I think the hope is, that as we read these, is not to feel like, am I good or am I not good? But to say, Jesus, where am I not trusting you with my life? What are the areas I'm not really willing to trust you? And how can I start loosening my grip and entrusting that to you? Because when he says he's not saying that hey, if you follow me, you're going to lose everything. But what he's saying is, if you follow me, are you willing to hold those things loosely? That even if they were to cost you some things, literally, physically cost you some things, would you still be willing to follow me? Would you still be willing to trust me, even when things don't make sense? You don't quite know how it's happening or what to do with it. Are you willing to trust me in that and follow me in that, even when it's difficult? So what do we do with this? Right? Because these are uncomfortable words in some sense, and we can acknowledge that. But I think there's some hope in that because of what Jesus promises, right? Back in Mark 10, he says, if you lose your life for my sake, you'll find it. And so how do we practice loosening those things so we can find real life in Jesus? What are some of those things that maybe we need to loosen our grip on? So that's what I want to ask as we kind of think about, okay, what areas of my life do I need to surrender over to Jesus? What are the areas of my life? And my hope is that this is kind of like a good self-reflection moment where we can look to these things and look at these different areas, and maybe the Holy Spirit, as you're looking at these, will kind of convict you and say, ooh, yeah, that's an area for me. And so I would encourage you to spend some time this week asking these questions. Okay, Jesus, have I surrendered this to you? Do I fully entrust you in this area of my life? And maybe and honestly, right, if we're honest, there's probably multiple areas where we're like, okay, I'm still kind of holding on to that one. Maybe for you, one of them is your schedule or time. Does Jesus have authority over how I spend my time each day and week? Or am I just have I crowded my schedule and say, hey, just kind of committed, hey, this is what I'm doing no matter what? And are we willing to entrust him with our time? And trust him with our schedule? Do we entrust him with our finances or our material possessions? Right? Am I open-handed with my finances? Or is money a source of fear, control, or selfishness? Right? Do we use our finances as a way to kind of control our life and maybe or are we willing to hold it open-handed and say, Jesus, this is yours and I entrust you with it? Career ambitions, right? Career and personal ambitions. Have we invited Jesus to shape my goals? Or do I just ask him to bless what I already want? Or even our relationship. Am I placing family expectations or approval above obedience to Jesus? And then when you think about politics, right, that's a big one for us. Does my loyalty to political views or political parties come before loyalty to Jesus' way of life? And I'll be honest, right, as I was thinking about this, there are some areas I'm looking at myself going, ooh, yeah, Jesus, I feel that. Like the idea of even my personal ambitions, like the idea of like, hey, Jesus, am I actually just asking you to bless what I already want to do? Like, hey, hey, Jesus, I want to do this. Can you just, hey, can you bless it? Hey, cool, sweet, thanks. That's not how it works. That's not really what he's interested in. And honestly, if I were to be also honest with you, one of the things is, man, I love being a dad. I love that. But there's also a danger where sometimes you can make my role as a dad an idol, where I kind of put that above my commitment to Jesus. Jesus, can you shape me so that way I'm willing to trust you? Because as a dad, I worry sometimes. And sometimes I can take control of that worry and hold on to it and say, Jesus, am I willing to trust you with my family? Even when it doesn't make sense, can I trust you that you can take care of her better than I could, instead of kind of white-knuckling it? And so I want you to think this week, hey, where areas of my life am I having a hard time in trusting in Jesus? What are the areas of my life that I'm having a hard time, or that I'm asking, hey, can you just bless what I'm already doing or wanting to do? Instead of saying, Jesus, what are you wanting to do in this area of my life? Where are you needing to nudge me and challenge me here, or encourage me? And so I want to end with this, just because as we look at these parables, the whole idea of these parables, as we kind of learned, right, when we first started this series, that the whole goal of these parables is to drive home a central truth. Is to drive home Jesus trying to say, I want you to grasp this. And I think what he would tell us when we look at these parables is that following Jesus means that we need to entrust him and surrender to him every aspect of our life. Not just parts of it, but every aspect. And that's hard for us. But as he says, it costs for us to follow him, is be willing to trust him. Doesn't mean we're going to get it perfect, but it means we're willing to try. We're willing to go on the journey of surrendering those things. That long obedience in the same direction. And so, here's our thought for the drive home, or I guess thoughts for the drive home. What is one area of my life I struggle to surrender to Jesus? Right? And then we said, spend some time this week thinking about that. Jesus, what is one area of my life I struggle to surrender? Where am I holding on to? And maybe trying to insert control over instead of letting you have control in that area. And then where might I need to realign my priorities so he can be at the center? And where do I need to realign my priorities? Maybe it's how we spend our time. Maybe it's how we spend our money. Maybe it's how we relate to people or the goals we have for ourselves. But are we willing to realign our priorities so that way Jesus can be at the center? And so my hope is when we take these seriously, that we spend some time reflecting, Jesus, can you realign my heart, realign my priorities, so that way they can reflect you? Because I know that following you is worth it. Even though the cost and the terms are high, following you is even better. And you're worth that journey. You're worth going on that journey with. Let's pray. God, we know that what you call us to is difficult, but also what you invite us to is better. You tell us in Mark 10 that if we try to hold on to our life, we try to gain control of everything and make it do what we want it to do, God, that we're going to lose it. We're going to lose sight of what you're inviting us into. But if we surrender our life to you, we entrust every part of our life to you, and including every relationship in our life, that we know that's where we find true life. That's where we find the life you invite us to, and hope that we experience in you. Help us to believe that. Help us to trust you with that. And Lord, that includes every part of our life, whether that's our career, whether that's our families, whether that is our own personal ambitions or our money. May you have priority. May you have control over all those things. May we invite you and entrust you with every aspect of our life. Because we know that following you isn't easy. We know that, God, that life just isn't easy. But Lord, just like a good mountain guide that invites us to follow you up the hill because we know that the view is worth it at the top, help us to trust you, to follow you knowing it's worth it. God, we love you. We say this all in your name. Amen.